The attic door was never meant to be opened. Chapter 1. It all started when I moved into my grandfather's old house. The place had been in our family for generations, and when my parents passed away, it was the only home left to me. I had no real attachment to it, but there was something comforting about the familiar creaks of the wooden floors and the smell of old books that lingered in the air. The house was large but isolated. It sat at the edge of a small town, surrounded by thick woods, and the nearest neighbor was miles away. There was a part of the house that always made me uneasy, though. It was the attic. I had visited it only once as a child, when my grandfather used to tell me stories about the mysterious things he kept up there. He said the attic door was special. It was never meant to be opened. I had forgotten about that warning until recently. I had been going through old boxes, sorting through the clutter left behind by my parents, when I came across an old photograph. It was of my grandfather standing in front of the attic door, smiling. His eyes, however, didn't look quite right. They seemed distant, as though he was looking through me. The photograph stirred something deep inside me, a feeling I couldn't shake. That night, I sat on the bed in the guest room, the same room where I had slept as a child, staring at the photograph. My thoughts were interrupted by a faint noise. It sounded like a creak coming from above me, the attic door. I shrugged it off, but something gnawed at me. I couldn't sleep. Eventually, I couldn't ignore it any longer. I grabbed a flashlight and went up to the attic. Chapter 2. As I reached the top of the stairs, the old wood beneath my feet creaked with every step, a sound I'd always found comforting in the past. But tonight, it felt different. The air seemed heavier, charged with an unsettling stillness. The attic door loomed in front of me, just as it had in the photograph. Old, worn, and almost as if it were waiting. I stood there for a moment, flashlight in hand, unsure of what to do. Part of me wanted to turn back to forget the whole thing, but another part urged me to press on. The curiosity that had been building ever since I saw that photograph had taken hold of me. I reached for the old brass doorknob and twisted it. The door groaned as it slowly opened, revealing the dark, cluttered attic. The air inside was musty, thick with dust. My flashlight illuminated old furniture covered with white sheets, boxes stacked high, and cobwebs in every corner. But there was something else, something that caught my eye. In the far corner of the attic was an old wooden chest, almost completely hidden beneath a pile of blankets. It was strange. I had never seen it before. The chest was covered in dust, but it had an eerie glow about it. It almost looked like it had been untouched for years, or maybe decades. My heart raced as I moved toward it. Every step felt like it echoed through the house, and the silence seemed to deepen around me. The chest, though, was silent, but I could feel something coming from it, an overwhelming sense of wrongness. I knelt in front of the chest and slowly began to clear away the blankets. The moment my fingers touched the wood, a cold shiver ran down my spine. I opened the chest. Inside, there were old letters, worn books, and photographs. Many of them were of my grandfather, but there was something else buried deep at the bottom, a small, intricately carved wooden box. It was beautiful, but something about it felt unnatural. I pulled the box out, and as I did, a sudden rush of cold air swept through the attic, extinguishing my flashlight. I froze, trying to calm my breath in the pitch-black darkness. That's when I heard it, a soft whispering sound, as if someone was right behind me, but no one was there. Chapter 3. The whispering grew louder, almost rhythmic, as though it was trying to communicate something, but the words were distorted, unintelligible. I spun around, my heart pounding in my chest. The attic was as still as ever, no sign of life, no shadow moving across the walls. I took a deep breath, trying to convince myself it was just the wind, the house settling. But there was no wind, and the house was too old to make such eerie sounds. I turned back to the wooden box in my hands. The carvings seemed to shimmer in the faint light of my dying flashlight, as if they were alive. The box was small, but somehow it felt incredibly heavy, far heavier than it should have been. I hesitated, my fingers trembling as I ran them over the delicate carvings. A sudden compulsion washed over me, urging me to open it. With a flick of my wrist, I released the small latch and lifted the lid. Inside, there was only a single piece of paper, yellowed with age, folded neatly. I unfolded it with care, reading the words written in ink that had faded almost beyond recognition. The door will always be there, but what lies behind it will change you forever. Do not open it. The warning sent a jolt through me. It was like the very walls of the attic were closing in, the air growing thicker, more oppressive. I looked around, suddenly feeling trapped, like the attic was no longer just a room but something much more sinister. I needed to leave, to close that door and never return. But I couldn't. My curiosity, that same force that had drawn me into the attic in the first place, was too strong. I glanced once more at the box, then at the attic door. It had opened so easily, too easily. Was it a coincidence? Or had something led me here? The whispering grew again, but this time I could make out one word, a name. Martha. The air turned frigid and I could see my breath fogging in front of me. The temperature dropped so quickly that it felt like the attic itself had become part of some other realm. A feeling of dread washed over me, but I couldn't look away from the door. And then, as if responding to my thoughts, the door creaked open further, revealing the darkness beyond. Something, or someone, seemed to beckon me forward. Chapter 4. I felt a chill run down my spine. The kind of chill that you only feel when you're standing on the edge of a precipice, unsure if stepping forward will plunge you into darkness or reveal some hidden truth. My fingers tightened around the box, the paper still clutched in my other hand. I looked back at the door, now wide open, inviting me in with its abyssal blackness. Martha. The name echoed in my mind, and for a brief moment I considered the possibility that the voice had been my own. Maybe it was the old house playing tricks on me. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just some trick of the mind. There was something in that room, something waiting. Despite the fear gnawing at my gut, I found myself moving toward the door, step by step. The floorboards creaked underfoot, and the smell of dust and decay filled the air. With every step, the atmosphere thickened, pressing in from all sides, making it harder to breathe. It felt as though the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to do something. I reached the door. It was heavier than I expected, as if it had been shut for centuries. My hand hesitated on the doorknob, but a strange force compelled me to turn it. Slowly, carefully, the door groaned open, revealing nothing but pure darkness. It was as if the room beyond had swallowed every shred of light in the attic. The whispers grew louder, clearer. They were coming from within, beckoning me to enter. Martha. I stepped inside. The darkness seemed to close in around me, but it wasn't just an absence of light. It was more like a presence, an oppressive force that made it hard to think, to breathe. My senses blurred as I stumbled further into the room, the door creaking shut behind me with an unsettling finality. I spun around trying to find the door again, but it was gone. The room was now a void, a space where the walls seemed to stretch and shift, distorting reality itself. And then, in the center of the room, I saw her. Martha. She was standing motionless, her back to me. Her long, disheveled hair hung like a curtain around her shoulders, and her clothes were torn, as if she had been trapped here for years. She didn't move, didn't acknowledge my presence, but I could feel her eyes on me, even without seeing them. The room seemed to pulse with the same strange energy I had felt when I first found the box, as if something ancient and powerful was awakening. Martha, I whispered, my voice trembling. She didn't respond. I took a cautious step forward, unsure of what I was about to face. The moment I moved closer, the room seemed to shift again. The air became thick, almost suffocating, as if the very space I was standing in was warping, pulling me deeper into the unknown. And then, as if on cue, Martha slowly turned to face me. Her eyes were hollow, black voids, empty of any trace of life. Her face was gaunt, skin stretched tight over bones, and her lips barely moved when she spoke, but her voice cut through the silence like a blade. You shouldn't have come. The words echoed in my mind, a warning I should have heeded long before. The darkness around me seemed to pulse, and the whispers grew louder, more frantic, like a chorus of voices calling my name. The walls of the room closed in, and I felt an overwhelming sense of vertigo, as though the room itself was collapsing, the reality I had known disintegrating into the shadows. Martha's figure began to distort, her form rippling as though she were a reflection in a broken mirror. Her voice grew louder, more insistent, calling out to me, warning me to turn back to leave the room before it was too late. But I couldn't move. My legs felt like lead, and my arms hung at my sides, paralyzed by some invisible force. The darkness around me swirled, and I could hear the whispers clearly now. Martha. 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 Suddenly everything went silent. The whispers stopped. The pressure in the air lifted. The room fell still. And then I heard it, a faint distant sound like the softest sigh. I turned, but Martha was gone. The room was empty, save for the growing blackness that had taken her place. That was when I realized something terrible. The attic, the house, none of it was real. It was all a trap, a lie, and I had fallen into it. The cabin's eerie movement persisted, its groans and creaks now becoming a part of the very fabric of the night. The floorboards seemed to hum with energy, as if the entire structure was alive, breathing with each shift of the night air. I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of dread. What kind of place had we rented? And why had the previous owners left so abruptly? The silence in the air only heightened my suspicion, and I began to question whether we had made a terrible mistake in coming here. Suddenly, I heard a sound, a faint scratching, like something scraping against the walls. I froze, straining my ears to listen more closely. The sound grew louder, and it was no longer just one. There were multiple scratches, like claws dragging against the wood, but they didn't seem to be coming from the inside of the cabin. They came from beneath it. I tried to convince myself it was the wind, the trees rubbing against the structure, but deep down, I knew something far worse was at play. I hurriedly grabbed my flashlight, its beam trembling in my hand. The others were still asleep, unaware of the growing danger lurking in the shadows. Stepping cautiously toward the door, I hesitated before opening it. A part of me knew I shouldn't, that whatever was waiting outside wasn't something I wanted to face. But the compulsion to uncover the truth was too strong. I had to know. As I stepped outside, the night air hit me like a cold slap to the face. The moon hung high above, casting an eerie glow over the surrounding trees. The forest around us seemed to be alive with whispers, as if the very earth itself was trying to speak. I followed the sound of the scratching, which now seemed to be coming from the ground beneath my feet. The ground was soft and damp, and as I stepped further into the clearing, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A series of marks had been carved into the earth, leading straight to the cabin's foundation. But these weren't simple scratches. They were deep, jagged cuts, as if something, or someone, had tried to claw its way out from beneath the cabin. I backed away slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. Whatever was under there, whatever was causing the cabin to move, was not something I wanted to encounter. Yet the more I tried to distance myself, the more the feeling of being watched grew stronger. I wasn't alone in this place. The ground beneath my feet shifted again, and the cabin creaked louder, almost as if it was responding to my fear. A low, guttural sound rose from below, followed by a faint whisper that seemed to speak directly to me, though I couldn't understand the words. Panicked, I turned and ran back to the cabin, slamming the door behind me. My breath was ragged, and I could feel the terror consuming me. My mind raced with questions, but the only one that mattered now was whether I could escape. But even as I locked the door and collapsed against it, I knew the truth. The cabin wasn't just moving at night, it was alive, and whatever was beneath it was getting closer. The atmosphere inside the cabin had changed completely. The air felt thicker, almost suffocating. Every creak, every shift of the wooden beams felt amplified, as though the walls themselves were closing in on me. I could no longer shake the feeling that something was wrong, deeply wrong. The scratching sound continued, now louder than ever, as if it were directly beneath my feet. My pulse raced as I backed away from the door, my eyes scanning the room for any sign of movement. The walls seemed to breathe with a life of their own, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. I couldn't stay here. I had to leave, but the thought of stepping outside again filled me with dread. What if whatever was beneath the cabin was waiting for me out there? What if it had already seen me? Suddenly, I heard a low, guttural growl coming from beneath the floorboards. It was unlike any animal sound I had ever heard, and it sent a shiver down my spine. I stumbled backward, falling into a chair. My mind raced as I tried to come up with an explanation, but there was no denying what was happening. The growl grew louder, vibrating the very floor under me. Then there was a sudden silence, complete and utter silence, as though the world itself had held its breath. I dared not move, waiting for something to happen. I was trapped in this cabin, surrounded by its sinister presence. Time seemed to stretch on forever, each second feeling like an eternity. And then it happened. The cabin shifted once more, but this time, it wasn't just a creak. The walls buckled, and the floor trembled violently beneath me. It was as though the entire cabin was being lifted from its foundations. The walls groaned under the pressure, and I could hear the unmistakable sound of something massive moving beneath the earth. My heart pounded in my chest as I bolted for the door, but the door wouldn't open. It was stuck, wedged shut by something from the outside. I pulled at the handle frantically, but it wouldn't budge. The growling returned, louder now, reverberating through the entire cabin. I could feel the heat rising from the floor, a putrid, sulfuric smell filling the air. I stumbled backward, horrified as the very ground beneath me began to crack open. From the fissures, I could see something writhing, dark and unnatural. I had to get out. I had to escape. But before I could make another move, the walls of the cabin collapsed inward. I screamed, the sound muffled by the roar of the earth splitting open beneath me. The floor gave way, and I fell into the abyss. The last thing I saw before everything went black was the twisted, gnarled shape of something monstrous, rising from the depths below.